All right, here we go. Episode 1 of our Descent Legends in Dark series. We're going to be painting Chance. And there's not a lot to it. Nothing too crazy, but this is a game that I grew up with, the first edition. And I ultimately getting the second edition. And this is not a third edition. This is just a brand new game in general. That the miniatures are fantastic. They did a really good job. They really stepped it up. And they're really good. Their game workshop's quality. So yeah, we're going to do that. But first, if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that bell. We're going to be doing the whole Descent series. We also have Madara, Chronicles of Drunagar, a whole bunch. So, but without further ado, let's go. Obviously, if you've been watching this channel, we're going to start off by scraping off all those nasty mold lines on this miniature. If you are wondering what I use, hit that description below. There's also a full paint list, and then I also posted the times of specific things we're going to paint because we're going to paint them in different orders. Just go check that out. So we're going to post it on a cap, and then we're going to spray paint it black, and then with just a little bit of gray on the bottom. You can use a spray paint if you want, but I'm using an airbrush. Whatever you want to use, it doesn't really matter. We're going to start with the base. We're going to do the whole thing right now besides the edge, and we're going to start off with the Mechanicus Standard Gray dry brush on that gray that we have. Now it's kind of a zenithal highlighting, so you're just kind of bringing that gray out just a little bit more to a darker gray. Once that dry brush is done, we're going to use another dry brush of Longbeard Grey on the same exact areas. You're hitting all of the rocks and the ruin that Chance is standing on. We are then going to put Agrax Earthshade all over the rocks, not the ruin, just the rocks. And you want to do this quickly these next couple steps because you don't want it to dry. So you're going to hit it with Agrax Earthshade, the rocky area, and then we're going to hit it next with little patches of Drakenhof Nightshade. And this is just going to kind of add some blues. We're going to add a green here in just a second throughout those rocks just to make the colorization look just off balance, like rocks. While it's still wet, we're going to use some Athian Camoshade, and again we're just going to hit it on some of those rocks because we're going to put some mossy effects here in a second. We're going to use some Gryph-Charger Grey on our ruin because it already is highlighted up, and this is a contrast paint, so it's basically going to go on. You're going to already see our highlights from the dry brushing. After those are all dry, it's going to take about 15-20 minutes. We are going to hit it with some Longbeard Grey, another dry brush, very lightly. Nothing crazy here. You just want to kind of bring it back up with some highlights. Next, we're going to take a little piece of sponge or whatever you have, and we're going to take some Straken Green right out of the pot, put it onto a napkin to get most of it off, and we're just going to start sporadically putting it all over our base, creating an effect of moss and just old ruin. Next, we're going to use some Castellan Green using the same exact technique. Now, there's no rhyme or reason for this. Do whatever you want. Make more, less. There's no pattern. There's no nothing. It's just whatever you feel like doing. Blob it on there. And finally, for our sponge, we're going to use some Averland Sunset, and this again is going to create some of that yellow mossy look effect, like dying moss if you've ever been in the woods. And obviously there are some cracks between our stone on our base, so we're going to use some steel using Drab between those cracks to give it like a nice dirty look. And that's it for the base. Next, we're going to start on the focal point of this miniature, and it is the cloth that Chance is wearing. It's going to be purple to start off, and then we're going to make it a pink. So you're going to take an equal mix of Xereus Purple and Lahmian Medium, on a wet palette or a well or whatever you're using, and we're going to hit all that cloth area on top of the head, the legs, the knee pads on top of the legs, and the back. Also, there's some elbow pads that Chance is wearing that we're going to hit with this same exact color. So follow along with what I'm doing. If I'm moving too quickly, stop the video and then just go for it and then move forward. Again, we're using this Lahmian Medium mix, but you're going to see that dark undertone stick through. That's going to help out here in these next couple steps. To add some darkness to our recesses, we're going to take a very small brush. I'm using a size 10-0 brush. We're going to put some Druchi Violet in some of the folds for our miniature and to include inside of the hood of our miniature. And all this is going to do is create some of that nice mix of a tone that we're not going to fully put over it, meaning the wash. Next, we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Lahmian Medium and Genestealer Purple, and we are basically putting over all of the purple area, but more focused on the raised areas and portions of the cloth that sun would hit. So we're focusing really hard on top and the sides of that hood that Chance is wearing, the kneecaps, the back legs that sun would hit. Now as you're doing this, you're probably going to notice that this is a very thin paint, and that's exactly what we want. We want to build up our highlights rather than slop them all on with just paint straight out of the pot thinned with water. We want to build these highlights up over time, let it dry, and then continue on with another highlight however bright you want to make it. This is your miniature. I'm just helping you out along the way. You make it as bright as you want it or as dull as you want it. It's up to you. But this Lahmian Medium really makes those undertones stick out and give you a nice gradual contrast and basically building up your colors. With that same 50-50 mix we just used, add 1 brush full of pink horror, or half a brush, however bright you want to make it, and start building up those highlights. If you think it's too thick, add some more Lahmian Medium to thin it down. You want to have like a nice runny paint where you're just building up those highlights and gradually doing them over time. Again, we're focusing on the raised areas, the kneecaps, the top of the hood, those areas that are going to get hit by the sun the most. It'll look a little bit bright when you first put on, but as the Lahmian Medium with the paint dries, it will make it look less bright, I guess you could say, but it will look very good and it'll look well blended, which is what we're looking for. For our final highlight for pink and our cloth area, we're going to add a little bit of Corax White, maybe a half brushful max, into our original mixture. Again, if it's too thick, add some more Lahmian Medium, and we are going to paint the areas on top of the hood, a little bit on the kneecaps, and just the areas that would hit with light the most. Now that the cloth is done, we are going to focus on our fur areas of Chance, and we have obviously the tail, some of the hands, the little pieces of ear that are sticking out, the face, and some of his arms. Don't forget to do the feet as well, as they are sticking out from the backside. The next fur tone we're going to use is some Dawnstone, and this is how we're going to start highlighting up our face and our tail. When we're doing the face, we're hitting the eyebrows and the nose. You can try the cheeks. It was just very hard to get in there, and I didn't want to kind of mess it up, so I left those alone. We're also going to use portions of it on the tail area, and this is just going to kind of build up our highlights. We don't want to overdo it on the tail. We just kind of want to make some different tones within the tail. Also, same thing with the other parts of the fur. Next, we're going to use a 50-50 mix of Adminastratum Grey, and we're going to highlight up those same areas we just did, and we're just building those highlights up on the face and on the tail and on the fur. Now there's no rhyme or reason on how I'm doing this. I'm just picking out little pieces and I'm adding some of the lighter gray to it to make it just a little bit more two-tone. Next, for the final highlight of our gray, we're going to use some Adminastratum Grey, and we're using it on the same areas. Now when you're looking at the tail, you kind of want to just focus on the zigzag portions just to kind of give it a nice different colorization. Now the card art has some spots on chance, so we're going to mix a 3-to-1 ratio of 3 parts Lahmian Medium, 1 part Nulin Oil, and we are going to put little dabs of spots on there. It's not that noticeable, but neither is it in the card art, so it's just kind of a little subtlety that we're going to add. For our hand, we'll paint the entire hand to include the fingers with Corax White. If you get some on the backside, it's not that big of a deal because we're going to paint it over with just a different color here in a minute. We're going to use this as well to get our eyes. There are already slits inside of our eyes, so we want to just kind of scrape those edges on the outside to get the natural slit that is already in there, because these models are fantastic. But if we don't get it all the way through, or if the paint gets in the crack, just take some black Abaddon paint and draw your slits right back in to make them a nice little eye. And finally, we're going to use some Nulin Oil on that paw of chance. For our leather pieces, we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Dryad Bark and Mournfang Brown. And this is going to create a nice leathery look that will not be as bright as the Mournfang Brown and not be as dull as the Dryad Bark, but nice something in between, something that matches the card art pretty well. There is a decent amount of leather on this miniature, so follow along as he's got some on the hands, the chest, his pouch area, all those little pieces that we're going to be getting. Also, do not forget the ear portion that is covering his ears. To put some wash onto our leather portions, we're going to use some Agrax Earthshade. Just be careful, don't get any on that purple or things that we've already painted like the fur. While we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to take some Abaddon Black and we're going to color in those paw portions on our, well, paw. Once that Agrax is dry, go ahead and take your original mixture of Dryad Bark and Mournfang Brown and just reapply it to the raised areas of our leather. Nothing crazy on this. For the metal portions of this miniature, as we are coming to a close here, we're going to use some Warplock Bronze for that claw that Chance is holding on to, which is awesome. So cool. Once we hit it with some Warplock Bronze, we're going to dull it down with some Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to totally let that dry before the next step. To highlight up some of our raised areas, we're going to take some Brass Scorpion. We're going to hit those raised areas, just the raised areas, just to make it some of that tone variation from dull bronze to bright bronze or brass. And it should look like this. For our other metal pieces, to include the knives, portions of Chance's hands and feet, and also the claws, we're going to be using some Leadbelcher on those. Again, be careful when we're doing this because we've painted everything else. We need to be cognizant of everything we've painted already because it's hard to fix at this stage. We're going to then take some Runefang Steel and brighten up our metal pieces. We did not do a wash. We did that on purpose because we want to brighten up just a little bit more. And we're going to use this on all of our metal pieces to include the knives, the buckles that are on Chance's face that are covering his mouth, and his hands, and a little bit on his feet. We're then going to take some Corax White and we're going to hit some of those raised areas on the elbow pads and the thigh pads that are matching the card art. Just a little bit of that art that matches the card art. That was good. And finally, your favorite part. Oh, we need to hit up the claws with a little bit of Abaddon Black. But since we have the Abaddon Black out, we just painted the claws with it, we're ready to go. Might as well just start painting that rim of the base, which means we are done with this miniature. Whew. And that's it. You did it. Not a whole lot of steps. It might seem like there is, but I think it turned out pretty freaking good. For something as simple, I guess you could say, as what we did, it turned out pretty good with those purplish, pinkish tones. So, good job. Otherwise, hey, thank you for watching. If you are a subscriber, thank you for subscribing and continually to be engaged in this channel. It means the world to me. I love doing it. I love doing these, and I love hearing feedback. Leave a comment. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, paint on.